Sounds like Mike Woodson is going to be done after this season at Indiana. If only we'd seen this coming.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, live on Friday morning with my guy, Andy Patton. It's the only daily national college hoop show out there, and we are your hosts. I already named this guy over here. I'm Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch of the day. And we want to remind you, you can catch every single episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers who are joining us, and of course, all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers, you bet $5, and if you win, you're going to get $200 back in bonus bets. Download the app or head on over to FanDuel.com today to get started. That is just 2 days away. Crazy, crazy stuff. Coming up on the show today, we're going to look back at some action from Thursday night, including Andy Patton. 3 buzzer beaters, one of which was a 70-footer. What are we doing? Crazy stuff. A big loss atop the West Coast Conference. We got some crazy Mike Woodson news. We're going to get you ready for all of the weekend action, including 4 ranked matchups. We got a top 6 matchup tomorrow. We got a Big East. Woo-hoo-hoo, a big one tonight in the Big East. Going to be a great show. But Andy, we got to start with this news that came out on Thursday. Apparently, and let's timestamp this, it is 11:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, because as of right now, this is not confirmed by Indiana, not confirmed by Mike Woodson or anyone else. But sources have said that Mike Woodson is likely to, unlikely, those 2 letters very much matter, unlikely to return to Indiana next season. And Andy Patton, if only we had said all summer long, this roster makes no sense. Yes, they've brought in a ton of talent, but it doesn't work, and it's not going to work. And Andy, spoiler alert, it isn't.
It's not. And it's one of those things where it's not like you really wanted to be right about this. Like I always try to assume that maybe the coaches obviously know more. They're with their players. They have a better sense. So I'm like, well, maybe there's something we're not seeing when you see certain rosters the way that they were put together. Indiana's roster was probably the one we talked about the most. We did talk a lot about Kansas State's roster, which hasn't gone particularly well either. And we talked about the lack of depth in the front court for North Carolina. And in all those instances, I thought, well, there's probably something that we're not seeing. Maybe a player who's going to pop, or maybe a system that's going to work. And in most of those cases, that hasn't really what we thought was going to happen is what's happening. And in Indiana, it's a situation where they've now lost 6 of their last 7 games in conference play, went from a 4-1 start in the Big Ten to 5-7. At this point, their only win was an overtime win against Ohio State. It was a road win, so that's not bad, but losses to Northwestern, losses to Iowa, like just haven't played particularly well. And the issues that we saw coming for this team is what has come together. They added a big man in Umar Ballo in a situation that forces Malik Reneau to play the 4, which he's good at, but I think you're probably better off with Reneau at the 5 and Mackenzie Mbako at the 4. Yep. Instead, you play Mbako at the 3. Your shooting takes a big hit. You're clogging up the paint. Your guards can't get to the rim. Your guards are not great shooters. We knew that coming in with Miles Rice and Kenan Carlisle and everybody except Luke Goody, that this wasn't going to be a particularly good 3-point shooting team. And so you create an offense or a roster that's not going to fit in college basketball. And then the results kind of speak for themselves. You've seen this offense get really bogged down. They're overly reliant on Ballo around the rim. He's just getting flooded with double and triple teams. There's not shooters to space the floor around him.
Exactly.
And Woodson hasn't made enough adjustments to the point where, the season they're not getting better as the season goes on. They're getting worse. And it's just, again, it's like you said, we could have seen this coming. It was not hard to predict that this roster wouldn't go well together, and that the amount of money they spent in the offseason to acquire talent was not going to lead to them having a better roster. Whereas you look at teams that use the transfer portal perhaps more in a better strategically, like Iowa State, for example, who goes out and gets guys that weren't as well known, like Joshua Jefferson or Brandon Chatfield or Deshaun Jackson, and fits them perfectly into their system. And teams like Indiana and Kansas State weren't able to do that. And now they have these rosters with a ton of money committed to these players and not a lot of success on the court. And for Indiana, it's a sad, likely end here for Mike Woodson's tenure. A guy who obviously bleeds Indiana basketball, loves this program, and has
absolutely right
early, but it's past time. And unfortunately, a decision that could have been made last year, potentially to hire Dusty May, looks really frustrating for the fans in Bloomington, especially as Dusty May and Michigan come into town on Saturday. That's going to be a harsh reality for fans to see what could have been with him coaching those very good Wolverines team.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, just back to the three-point shooting, they're 32.2% as a team, 276th in the nation, Andy. Again, we called it. ESPN's article about this, and this is not bashing ESPN, I just want to make a point here, says, quote, following an offseason rebuild that included one of the better transfer portal classes in the country, headlined by Umar Ballo, Miles Rice, and Kanan Carlisle, Indiana entered the season with considerable expectations. Andy, I don't think they should have, because sure, as this article says, quote, one of the better transfer portal classes. Yes, in terms of talent, in terms of sheer talent, in terms of good players, but all along the roster was flawed. And Andy, like zooming out big picture, and then we'll come right back to this game on Saturday. This is going to be the mark of what teams are successful year after year after year in the transfer portal NIL era. It's going to be about roster construction, not just getting whatever the best talent is out there, regardless of how it fits and works and all that. So they're every year, it's going to be about those who bring in a great collection of talent versus those who bring in the right talent and the right pieces for who they are and what they're doing. And that's why it's been so easy to call out things like those three teams that you said that didn't do it well. So there's that. And hilariously now, Andy, as you said, we do have number 23 Michigan, who's tied for first in the Big Ten, in large part because they got Dusty May, in large part because they did get the right pieces that fit at Indiana on Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Ken Palm has it, Michigan -4. Andy, do we want to continue to talk about this Mike Woodson side of things, or do you want to go to the game itself? You pick.
Yeah, a little bit of both, I guess. I think the not only the fact that the fans in Bloomington will have to see Dusty May and this successful team and the way that they operate and know that could have potentially been their reality, but like you said, Michigan was a team that put together a roster. Dusty May put together a roster that fit with what he wanted to do, and he's also been able to make some adjustments. I don't know. I mean, they clearly planned the two big lineup from the get-go. Like, he brought in Vlad Golden, a player that he was familiar with, that he understood because he coached him for many years. They get Danny Wolf, who's been just absolutely fantastic and has guard-like abilities as a 7-footer. And once they kind of realized that they were able to do that, they made those adjustments and they've utilized those players so effectively. And again, the fact that Danny Wolf and Michigan can utilize two bigs successfully on the floor together, when Indiana went out and got a huge big man, a very talented big man in Umar Ballo, and cannot seem to play him and Malik Renaud together to any kind of effect, it's got to just be so frustrating knowing that could have been the reality for this team. And I sympathize with the fan base, because it's a proud fan base. It's a fan base with high expectations, and they're not being met right now. And it's a new era. And we knew that some coaches were going to be good at figuring out this new era. We knew that some weren't. And unfortunately for Indiana, they got a tough choice to figure out what they want to do next. And they're not the only high-profile program that's going to be looking for a new coach. So we'll see what that looks like. There's some names already out there, but you look at, this job's going to be open. Virginia is going to be open at the end of the season. Florida State and Miami are both going to be open with the retirements of Leonard Hamilton and Jim Larinaga. So Indiana should be the most appealing job out of that group. Should probably be the job that can pay the most to a coach, I would expect. But it's only February 7th. There's going to be other jobs. There's going to be other jobs that open up, ones that we're not even considering right now. And at that point, it'll be interesting to see what Indiana's able to do, because I don't think they can pry Dusty May away from Michigan after this successful season. So they got some other decisions they're going to have to make.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there might be Indiana fans now that are like, well, now let's go get Dusty May and drop a bag. That ain't happening, man. No, you had your shot. And I, again, as you said, I hate that for the Indiana fans, but the
Mhm.
front office, or, the athletic department is what has messed this up.
Mhm.
You think Ann Arbor is just going to willingly let him go? No,
Mhm.
they got a
Mhm.
great thing. They know what they've got in Dusty May. It's look, that's crazy. So, Andy, going to be an interesting game. I fully expect Michigan to go in and win this game, but of course, watch, it's going to be it's going to be like Arkansas at Kentucky last week, right? It's
Right.
going to be like that all over again. So, we'll see what happens. Andy, we did have very quickly some interesting action on Thursday night. Ohio State hosts Maryland and gets a nice 73-70 win. The Terps were up 17 in this game at one point. Bruce Thornton drops 31 for Ohio State, plus 5 boards, 6 assists, played all 40 minutes. And great stuff for the Buckeyes. They jumped to 6-6. They're still, mid-tier Big Ten, but they've won 4 out of 5. And that lone loss coming to Illinois, but albeit a very confusing Illinois team right now. And for Maryland, it's tough because they were in kind of that second group of 3. There was both Michigan schools and Purdue up there at the top with 2 losses. Purdue in action tonight, and then the Terps were just right there with Wisconsin and UCLA at 4 losses. So that drops them 1 back, and now they got to play catch up.
Yeah, Don's picking up a win at home against St. Mary's in the WCC. Kind of alluded to there being an upset in the WCC earlier. Gonzaga took care of business against LMU, and now St. Mary's. There's a bit of an opening for Gonzaga to potentially get back to the top now. Right now, Gonzaga's still in 3rd. San Francisco's in 2nd. Still, St. Mary's though only 1 loss. The other 2 teams still both have those 3 losses. The Gales had not lost yet in conference play. As we head into a day where both Auburn and Duke have matchups as they remain undefeated in conference play, St. Mary's was one of the better teams that still hadn't lost a game in their conference, and now they have. So we'll see what happens with Duke going on the road at Clemson, Florida, of course, Auburn hosting Florida. We'll, of course, talk about those 2 games a little bit later, but nice win for Chris Gerlofson and the San Francisco Dons.
Yeah, and crazy that it's not crazy, but so kind of fun that it's 3 traditional WCC schools at the top and neither of the 2 Pac-12 schools that joined. Andy, very quickly, and then you move us along. We had three Thursday buzzer beaters. Fairfield over Marist from 70 feet away. 59-56 is the final in a barn burner of a high-scoring affair. Omaha over North Dakota, 80-77. JJ White, ball's bouncing around a little bit. He gets it on the wing right there in front of the bench. Game winner, 24 points from him. And Iona, Rick Pitino's former team, 70-67 in OT over St. Mary's. They get an offensive rebound and kick out buzzer beater wing 3. Boom, boom, boom. A fun Thursday night with all 3 of those happening, not at like that elite high major level of the sport. Great stuff always.
Well, we alluded to it. We got a top 6 matchup coming up on Saturday. However, ESPN thinks it's more important for us to watch Lucas sit on the Lakers bench. So you can catch it on ESPN2. Plus, we have 3 other ranked matchups this weekend, including that aforementioned Rick Pitino and St. John's going on the road at UConn tonight. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, folks, Prize Picks, the big game is almost here, and there is no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with 1 more correct pick and you're cashing out. How about pairing it with Saquon Barkley rushing or receiving touchdowns, just 0.5? If he gets 1, or Travis Kelce, if either of them get 1 touchdown in the big game, you win cash. What I love most, fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, folks. Once again, it is a loaded slate of epic college basketball games this weekend. We're going to talk about one big game on Friday. We also got some matchups to talk about on Saturday. All of these are ranked matchups. All 25 of the ranked teams in the AP poll are in action Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So we're going to talk about the ranked unranked games here. 8 of those teams playing, 4 of those matchups. And then we'll talk about the other 17 games in kind of a rapid fire fashion to close out the show. But Isaac, We want to get to the Friday night game because that is a real fun game in the Big East. But let's start with what is clearly the most exciting matchup of the weekend. Number 6 at number 1, the Florida Gators going on the road to the Auburn Tigers for Eastern time. As we said, on ESPN2 now, as it gets flexed off of ESPN in favor of the new Luka Doncic-led Lakers team. FanDuel favoring Auburn in this one by 9.5 points. Like to see this game on ESPN. Frustrating to see college basketball bumped again. Not, unfortunately, all that surprising, but still, even if we can't watch it on ESPN, at least it's not on ESPN Plus. At least it's not on ESPNU. At least it didn't get kicked somewhere like that. And it's still going to be an incredible basketball game. What are you looking forward to in this one?
First off, I'm going to move out away from you before Lakers fans come after you for saying that the Lakers are now led by Luka.
Well, fair enough.
I think there's that side of things. But yeah, we obviously don't know the timelines, but clearly ESPN jumped the gun on this thing, assuming that Luka would start playing Saturday, and he announced literally on Thursday, I think it was, that his timeline is Monday. So that's why this is happening. And I haven't gone to follow the thread line, Andy, of like what game then got bumped from ESPN2 to ESPNU and on or whatever that happened. But this game, man, I cannot wait. And Andy, one of the things before we talk about the game itself that's so ridiculous and insane is just the seemingly relative ease with which Auburn is doing what they're doing. And I just want to stop here in early February to say, do not miss this. Don't take this, folks, for like normal or typical or whatever. This is potentially the best. I mean, this is the best league this year. This is potentially the best, most deep league we've literally ever seen in college basketball. Like, it's at the very least in that conversation. And Auburn is going through it like a hot knife through butter right now. Whether they've got John Broome or not, they've been doing that. And now that he's back, they're even more doing that. And it's absolutely crazy. And so I just want to say, whether you're an Auburn fan or not, just as a college basketball fan, you got to be able to appreciate what Bruce Pearl's team is doing in a year where I early on thought they might get derailed by personalities because of that whole plane thing. But here we are, and it's nuts. Are they going to go undefeated in the SEC? Absolutely not. And that's going to be on Cold Takes when they do. But I mean, it's just they are halfway through right now. SEC only plays 18 games, and it's nuts. So that said, Andy, I have no reason to think that Florida is going to come in and have anything for Auburn to win this game. It could be a close game, and I expect it to be, not a wild like 20-point victory for Auburn, although it very easily could be. Florida back on the hump this week after that double-digit, that 20-point loss to Tennessee, a shorthanded Tennessee last Saturday. They beat Vandy at home. But man, now going on the road to Auburn is very, very difficult. Going to be interesting. I think also there's the whole Walter Clayton Jr. factor. Does he play in this game? As we record, we don't know that yet, Andy. And I think that's the question. Can a shorthanded Florida have anything to say at a now back to full strength Auburn?
Yeah, Auburn's 12-1 in quad one games. The second most quad one wins this season, I believe, is 8 or 9, maybe. They have 12-1. Their only loss being that away game at Duke. And then they've won quad one games. They beat North Carolina by 13. They beat, they beat Ohio State by a crap load. I can't even do the math on that one. They beat Purdue by 18. They beat Mississippi State by 22. Like, they have multiple road quad one wins. Like, this team is just, like you said, they're just cruising. They've played a few close games, but they find ways to win them. They have some blowouts over really good teams like this. They're just absolutely rolling right now. They've won games without John Broome. They've won games in situations where they had like team chemistry issues before the game. Like, they've done it all. It's been an
Iowa State comeback.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a great one. So, yeah, I'm very curious how this game plays out. Florida's a tough matchup for them. They're a tough matchup for anybody, especially when they're playing at full strength. But if they're not at full strength, going on the road to beat Auburn, really, really tough task for Todd Golden's team. Isaac, there's one other game in the SEC between two ranked teams, Texas A&M, who is up to number 10 now. Shout out Buzz Williams' team. They're going on the road to take on Dennis Gates and Missouri. Obviously, Missouri's at 15. They're going to fall after their loss earlier this week. But if they can pick up a win here at home, hold the home court against a good A&M team, that might keep them, should keep them in the top 25. This game is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on the SEC network. Ken Pom favoring the Tigers by 3. What do you make of this other SEC matchup before we talk the Big 12 game and then the Big Daddy on Friday night between the two Big East foes?
This game legitimately could be a better game than Florida at Auburn.
Yeah.
And that's both
Ken Palm's
because
thrill score absolutely thinks so, for the record.
and that's more about Auburn, but it's also about how good both of these teams are. Texas A&M has been better than I think either of us expected them to be, more consistent. And this Missouri team is for real. And I think people are having trouble coming to grips with that because of the bagel they had last year in SEC play. But I mean, they just went on the road to Knoxville and played a very competitive game against the Vols. I had the lead for a good while and ended up losing by 4. But man, there's so many guys. Tony Perkins, I love what he's doing. Tamar Bates led the way the other day for Mizzou, and I think we both thought coming in it'd be like, oh man, Mark Mitchell's going to Missouri, things might be better this year. But like Caleb Grills, we need to do a story on Caleb Grill, Andy. His progression from Iowa State to like all the mental health struggles he had, and now being back and doing what he's doing at Mizzou, just lighting it up from outside. It's so fun to see, and this game should be electric there in Columbia on Saturday.
Big 12 matchup on Saturday. Texas Tech, 13th ranked Red Raiders on the road at Arizona. Number 20 for Tommy Lloyd's team. They're back in the top 25. They fell out early in the season, clawed their way back. They're playing better basketball than basically anybody in the conference right now. Their only loss in conference play is to this Texas Tech team. Now they get them at home in Tucson, 10:30 Eastern time. This game will be on ESPN. Isaac, I'm really excited about this game. Two high-profile teams, two high-profile offenses. We're going to see how Texas Tech can do defensively against Arizona. Obviously, the Caleb Love effect will be in full effect in this game, as it so often is. But I'm really excited about the front court matchups here. JT Toppin has been playing some great basketball for Texas Tech. How he looks against Toby Awaka, how Arizona attempts to defend him. Vasir has been playing great coming off the bench for the Wildcats. Like there's a lot of intrigue in this game, a lot of things. And Chance McMillian's been playing phenomenal for the Red Raiders, like an Arizona kid. Like I'm really excited to see how this game shakes out. I think if Arizona can get a W here, split the series with Texas Tech, haven't lost any other games. I mean, we're gonna have to have some real conversations about the comeback that this team has made as a team that struggled in the non-conference to then turn around and be the best team in conference play in the Big 12. That's a pretty wild story for Tommy Lloyd and the Cats.
Absolutely, it is. And JT Toppin tweaked his left ankle on what was it, Wednesday night or Tuesday night? I can't remember. Midweek. That's the phrase I'll use against Baylor, and so we'll see how good to go he is. But man, this Arizona and how funny, Andy. Of course, we all assumed that of the two Tennessee big men to leave, it would be Tobe Awaka having the year and not Jonas Adu, right? Like, of course, that's how this is playing out. But man, I love that this game. I've had this game circled all week long because after Texas Tech beat Houston last weekend, if they can now, because that was at Houston, if they can back-to-back Saturdays knock off Houston and Arizona, which would tie them in second place, and they'd have the tiebreaker over Arizona, being just one game back at Houston. I mean, it's crazy what this Texas Tech team is doing. In fact, folks, if you didn't get to hear it earlier this week, Chris Level, who's the color analyst on Texas Tech radio, joined me for a conversation about the Red Raiders earlier this week. Great job. So you might want to check that out if you haven't. But it's just so impressive how their offenses really come alive. You know, we knew them so well for their defense, like in the Beard era. But man, this Texas Tech team is a lot of fun. But so is this Arizona team. Both teams, great stories. And it's just one of those games where it's hard to see one of them lose. Andy, really quick before we go to tonight's Big East game, literally just like as we've been recording, John Rothstein tweeted going back to Florida's Walter Clayton Jr. will be available for Saturday's game against Auburn per a school spokesman. So just a note on that.
Good. You always want to beat teams at the full strength. So for Auburn, I think you'd rather have Clayton in the mix. But obviously, that's a huge boost for Florida's chances of pulling off a road upset in that game. One more big game to talk about between ranked teams tonight. Number 12 St. John's at number 19 UConn. Rick Pitino, Danny Hurley, two of the biggest, most colorful personalities in college basketball. 8 Eastern time on Fox. FanDuel favoring UConn by 3.5. What a season for St. John's. If you haven't tracked the Rick Pitino in year 2 sub conversation that's been happening, every time Rick Pitino takes over a new program, he dominates in his second year. This goes all the way back to Providence. This has been the case for him at Kentucky, was the case for him at Louisville, was the case for him at Iona. It is now the case for him at St. John's. They went 20-13 last year, which is pretty good. pretty good in your first season. They're 19-3 right now. The Johnnies they are playing some incredible basketball. Kadari Richmond looks like an absolute star. I've been a huge fan of Zuby Ejiofor, and I think he's going to be a huge factor in this game against UConn. In the front court, where UConn has not been as good defensively without Donovan Clingan. Samson Johnson's still very good, but that has been a way that UConn has been beatable this year at home or on the road, as if you can kind of get to the rim and score effortlessly, crash the offensive glass, do stuff like that. And I think St. John's has the personnel to be able to pull off a win here. They're obviously the higher ranked team, but it's hard to beat UConn at home. But this is going to shape out to be an absolute blast of a basketball game.
And Andy, it's interesting because both of these teams are in the midst of a 3 or 4 game stretch where they're playing the other top 4 teams in the conference, because right now UConn just beat Marquette last Saturday. They have this St. John's game, and then Tuesday they are at Creighton. On the other hand, for St. John's, they just beat Marquette on Tuesday. They have this game tonight against UConn, Villanova on Wednesday, and then they host Creighton next Saturday. So for both teams, man, this is a critical kind of 2-week segment that is going to go a long way to determining who ultimately winds up on top of the heap of the Big East. And obviously, as we know right now, UConn is 2 games back in the loss column of St. John's. So big time ramifications for this thing. And I asked on one of our shows this week, hey, is this the year that St. John's knocks off the King? Will they be the Kings not only of New York, but the Big East? This is a massive opportunity to do that tonight, and we'll see what happens. I do think they play again in just a couple. Sunday, February 23rd, we get another version of this game. So we do have both of them yet to be played. All right, Andy. Well, the other 17 ranked AP teams are in action this weekend. We're going to get you ready for the best of the rest, including a fun one in Fayetteville, Arkansas. All that coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59, man, it's here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. So whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin flip, which one are you going with, Andy, heads or tails? Tails. I'll go heads. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, the live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets if you win for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. The line for this game, Kansas City -1.5. That means they would be the first ever three-peat in Super Bowl history. So download the app today or head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. Remember, bet $5, and if you win that first bet, $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. And you want to mention, we're going to go into some Saturday games, but one other ranked team in action tonight. We said it earlier, but we didn't talk about the game. USC at number 7 of Purdue, 7 Eastern on FS1. FanDuel has it Boilermakers by 13.5. We expect them to keep on rolling and keep pace at the top of the Big Ten with the Michigan schools. But Andy, let's go to Saturday's games. And there's 4 that I want to highlight, and I'm going to let you start where you want to here. We'll go chronologically. Number 11, Marquette at Creighton, which is great because we just mentioned we've got the other 2 top 4 Big East schools in action against each other. Simultaneously, tomorrow, we've got the other 2 top 4 teams. So, a lot at stake in the Big East. That's 2 Eastern on Fox. Ken Palm has it Blue Jays -1. Marquette needs to get back in the win column. The Cornflower State, is that what it's called? I don't know. Number 16, Kansas at Kansas State. I'm gonna look that up. Maybe it's the Sunflower State. I don't know, Andy. 2 Eastern on ESPN. FanDuel has it -5.5. That game will be there at Kansas State in Manhattan. No, not that one. It's the smaller one. Number 2, Duke at Clemson, 6:30 Eastern on ESPN. FanDuel has it Duke -7.5. Number 3, Alabama at Arkansas, 8:30 Eastern on ESPN. Ken Palm has it Bama -4. Andy, a lot of intrigue in this quartet of games. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm excited about all these games. Let's start with Duke at Clemson, because if Duke is going to lose a game in conference play, like we talked about how Auburn's still undefeated, and we don't expect them to remain undefeated in conference play just because the SEC is so dang tough. And even if it's not this game against Florida, they have so many challenging matchups coming up the rest of the season. Duke doesn't really. The ACC is not particularly good this year. That's been an off topic of discussion, with North Carolina not playing very well. Shout out Louisville. They look better. Clemson's been good, not great. Wake Forest, Pitt's been down. Like, there's just not a lot of great teams in the conference, but winning at Clemson is tough. And I think this is the biggest challenge for Duke remaining in the regular season. If they win this game, the likelihood of them going undefeated in the ACC goes up fairly considerably. Also, huge shout out to Dick Vitale, who is planning to return and call this game. And he made plans to return to a game earlier this year, and unfortunately had an incident and was unable to do so. So we're incredibly excited to see Dick Vitale back in action on the broadcast for this game. Obviously, there's a ton of intrigue in this matchup for the Duke undefeatedness of it all, but I'm also just excited to see somebody like Ian Shefflin going up against this Duke front court. Is he going to be defending Cooper Flagg? Like, how is that going to shake out? Like, I like seeing Flagg get tested by older veteran guys and kind of those tough-nosed players like Shefflin, and I think there's a lot of fun that we'll see in that game. Jaden Zachary's been playing well for Clemson. Like, it's going to be a really fun matchup on Saturday, amidst so many other ones. I'm so pumped to see Nate Oats versus John Calipari. That's going to be fantastic. I love the Big East, and I love the way Creighton's been playing. They stumbled a little bit against Providence, but still got the win with Big Call dropping 35, I think, in that game. So these are all fantastic basketball games, but Duke at Clemson is going to be must-watch TV, not even just with Dick Vitale back, although that certainly helps.
Yeah, Andy, and by the way, I'll get back to that in a second. It's so interesting because, like, not even, I think typically we would think, oh, Duke's best chance to lose is at Carolina to end the regular season. Nah, the way things are going right now, it is very much this game. And reminder, Clemson is coming off a home triple overtime loss to Georgia Tech midweek, and Clemson then hosts North Carolina on Monday in Big Monday. So a quick turnaround, both at home, but against those two perennial blue bloods. So that'll be interesting. Andy, I went and looked it up. Kansas is the sunflower state, not the cornflower state. So I had it right the second time. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, with Marquette, they have now lost back-to-back games, albeit, we're talking about these teams all being in a stretch of playing each other. It was hosting UConn and then at St. John's. These Golden Eagles, I think, had probably been overachieving based on what we thought at the beginning of the season, but they've stepped up and it had played so well. They were 15-2 to start, 6-0 in Big East play, lost to X, and even beyond that, won the next three. We're sitting at 18-3, 9-1. And so this is a little bit of a crossroads moment for me for Marquette. They're 18-5, 9-3, could very well be staring down the gun of a 3-game losing streak. Like, that is a real thing. And Creighton, very much to their credit, they started off with some struggles. They were 9-6 overall, 2-2 in the Big East, and have rattled off a whole bunch of wins in a row since then, 8 in fact, and this could very well be number 9. It should be a close game, but I'm really intrigued by that one. But Andy, let's go down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Bud Walton Arena, because Arkansas all of a sudden seems to have a couple things figured out here. They've won 2 in a row, both on the road, at Rupp, and then in Austin, Texas. Alabama, meanwhile, seems to be the second best team in the SEC, just behind their state counterpart. I'm not even guessing at the Alabama State nickname, Andy, because I don't know. But don't just assume Alabama goes in here and wipes the floor with Arkansas. They probably should. But the way things are starting to click a little bit at Arkansas, and maybe, just maybe, what people had said about, could Arkansas be better after Boogie Flan's out? Initially, I was unsure. Now, maybe. We'll find out. It's going to be really interesting on Saturday.
It's the Yellowhammer State, for what it is worth.
What?
For the state of Alabama. No. I would not have been able to guess that.
What even is that?
I have no idea. I did not look beyond reading that it was the Yellowhammer State.
The Yellowhammer State?
If you're in Alabama, if you know what that means, please leave us a comment. Let us know. We need to be educated on the state of Alabama. I'm incredibly excited about this game. And I talked about this a little bit after Arkansas's win earlier this week, that, it looks, just from an eye test perspective in that Texas game, that Arkansas is better without Boogie Flan. And it's not a knock on Flan at all. 16-6 was what he was averaging as a true freshman. He's a fantastic player. But the roster construction, I think this is a little bit of a gift for Calipari in the sense that, we might be criticizing them in a somewhat similar way. And Calipari's heard this criticism before. It's not new for him of too many cooks in the kitchen, too many high profile players. And Antonio Reeves was this great addition because he could dominate without needing the ball in his hands as often. You get a guy like John L. Davis, and it was like, oh, there's a lot of similarities, but that was a pretty big difference, is that John L. Davis kind of needs the ball. DJ Wagner's a ball dominant player. And then you add in Boogie Fland, and the cohesion was not there. And now it looks more comfortable. They're more free flowing. They seem to have a better rhythm. So I do think that this team has improved. I mean, clearly the result on the court has improved in Fland's absence. And I don't think it's him related. It's just a situation of them kind of needing some extra space. I remember, to kind of tie it back to the Indiana conversation, there was a lot of people saying that they thought that Indiana looked better without Malik Reneau. And it wasn't because Malik Reneau was bad. It was because they didn't have as much of a logjam in the front court. So it seems like that's a theme with some of these teams that have underperformed. But yeah, Arkansas playing some good ball right now. You make a great statement beating Kentucky. You make a nice statement beating Texas, even though you kind of let them back into that game. But boy, howdy, can you make a phenomenal statement if you can hold home court and beat the third-ranked Crimson Tide team. It's going to be an absolute blast of a game. And speaking of John L. Davis, he has scored his 3 highest scoring games have been in his last 3, 18 points, 24 points. It's pretty clear that the role change for him has worked wonders for his performance this year for Coach Cal.
Yeah, Andy, crazy stuff. And that is no coincidence in any way, shape, or form. All right, folks, there is not much on Sunday, obviously, with the big game going on. Probably the biggest one is Rutgers at number 18, Maryland. Rutgers had that win over Illinois. Maryland just coming off a loss last night. So that's your noon Big Ten game, noon Eastern. Ken Palm has it, Maryland -12. Memphis also in action. And then we've got Ohio State at Nebraska. Ohio State needs to come off of that Maryland win and show that they've got something. So not much going on Sunday. So make sure get your watching in early and settle in for the big game. Andy, who's going to win that thing?
I think it's going to be the Chiefs. I think they're going to take the 3rd in a row. I think a lot of people aren't going to like that. I know somebody who will, in fact, like that. But that's what I expect to go down on Sunday. It's going to be fun.
Did you mean Taylor Swift? Is that who you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, obviously referring to Taylor Swift.
Clearly and obviously. Get us out of here, Andy Patton.
Folks, Saturday night, so many great games. If you want to hear some instant reaction to those games, check out the Locked On College Basketball Game Night Show hosted by our friend Leaf Tulane. It'll be live Saturday evening after the majority of the action is done. It's wherever you get your podcast. Find it wherever you're listening to this. You can find it there. It'll be live on YouTube as well. That's going to wrap it up for us today. We will be back with you. Isaac and I will be back with you on Monday talking about the big storylines from the weekend, talking probably about that big game as well, and getting you ready for Big Monday and everything else going on. But as always, we want to say apologies for the lawyer family, especially since we didn't give a lot of time to Purdue today. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until next week, peace out.